Well, China's President Xi Jinping is here in India for the second informal summit with Prime Minister Modi in Tamil Nadu. The setting is lovely. They've had a tour of monuments today. They've watched a cultural performance, a dance performance. They've had dinner, and tomorrow morning they will be meeting again for even delegation level talks, as well as a one-on-one meeting before the Chinese president flies off to Nepal. Now, that's another story in itself. But first, on this particular informal summit, the second one, as I said, but very different from the first informal summit that took place last year in Wuhan in China. Firstly, what is an informal summit? Well, it is what the word says. It's informal. It means that there is no formal structure to it. There's no structured agenda. Normally these things are very well laid out. They're planned to the minute. They're planned, what issues will be discussed in what order, how they'll be presented, which officials will be present in the room. So what makes an informal summit different is that it is actually truly informal. So you have these two leaders who, over the course of the day, whether it's while walking in the garden somewhere, while touring monuments, or whether it's over dinner, over breakfast, over lunch, they get a chance to informally interact with each other on whatever they want. So they can decide to talk about the economy, which I'm sure they will. It's expected to come up on defense ties, on the regional situation, on terrorism, on more confidence building measures for the border, for instance. So it's up to them how they want to structure that conversation. And officials basically say that this is a good thing because it doesn't bind leaders of two big powers like India and China in particular, which is a very complicated relationship. It doesn't really bind them down to a certain format and to outcomes. That's the other important thing, because when you have an informal summit, you're not weighed in by expectations that there has to be a joint statement, that there has to be a number of agreements which have to be signed. No, there's none of that. So you don't have those expectations of any outcomes per se. It's a process. It's the process, therefore, that becomes important. So what you will have are press releases by both countries on their version of how these meetings went, and one can expect that these would be very general in their nature, looking at the overall relationship, and would probably not get into detailed specifics. But what made the Wuhan informal summit different was the atmospherics that led up to it. Because even though Doklam had happened, there was a concerted effort by both countries not to sort of step on each other's toes, not to make controversial statements just, leading up to that summit, so that when the two leaders did meet in Wuhan, they were able to discuss new mechanisms for how to handle disputes on the line of actual control. And that actually helped, because we saw a dramatic decline in the number of skirmishes that one heard about at the LAC over the last year and a half as a result of that summit. But in the run-up to this particular informal summit in Tamil Nadu, it's not really been so good. And you can see that the relationship has actually been more rocky and has faced greater challenges. In particular, after India's decisions on Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh on the 5th of August this year, we've seen China really attacking India internationally. It took the issue up at the UN Security Council in an informal meeting. It has supported Pakistan very openly on its position. Pakistan, of course, is a very important old ally of China. And that has really irked India. And what we also saw was that on the eve of this informal summit, Pakistan's Prime Minister was in Beijing for his own bilateral meeting with President Xi. They issued a joint statement where they talked about resolving Kashmir as per the UN resolutions. Now, this is all language that India has reacted angrily to. In fact, President Xi was quoted as saying to Imran Khan on the eve of this visit to India that he was watching what's happening in Kashmir closely. And India responded to that and said that, Kashmir is completely an internal matter of India. So the optics, the tone that has been set ahead of this meeting hasn't been so good. And it's hoped that when, the two leaders do finish their meetings on Saturday afternoon, that they are able to kind of manage those wrinkles that have come in and kind of reset the relationship. They do meet far more often than they used to. But another thing that has come up is the fact that President Xi is going off to Nepal right after he visits India. And that too is being seen as a deliberate hyphenation by sections of the Indian establishment as well. So all is clearly not well in the India-China relationship. And many say that is why informal summits like this become all the more important, because it gives the leadership a chance, more so at a time like this, to be able to speak and to find a way forward. The question, though, I'm sure that would worry many in the Indian establishment is that why things do keep coming up with China in the way that they do, particularly with regards to Pakistan, terrorism and those issues. Even though the two leaders of India and China do meet far more frequently, not just bilaterally but at multilateral summits as well, even though the engagement is greater, why is India not able to move forward with China on the issues that matter to us the most with China, like trade, like the boundary issue, etc. So that, I think, is something that the establishment will be hoping could change in the months ahead.